So welcome everybody. This is the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call. This is the Tuesday 8 a.m. Community call happening every single Tuesday at 8 a.m. except maybe on holiday times in the top of the year, and then on summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, we'll have a few weeks always off as well. But typically 8 a.m. Tuesday, every single Tuesday with Microsoft presenters, and that's also an exception, which we there's certain exceptions on that one as well within that rule. But typically it's with Microsoft presenters coming from PMs and engineers and cloud advocates like today as well. Today is February 13th, 2024. My name is Vesa Juvonen, and I'm a principal product manager in Microsoft 365 platform areas. We'll start with a typical setup, going through the latest updates and news from Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. What's the latest news in Microsoft blogs? What are the different assets for ready to you to get started on building experiences, for example, for SharePoint Embedded or Copilot or SharePoint Framework or Microsoft Teams and Power Platform. So all of those assets are available. Everything is pretty much free for you. So please take advantage of all of that. And we're going to recap all of those things as we get moving. And then we will go to the actual stars of today, we'll start with Bob German, who's going to talk about extending Copilot for Microsoft 365 using pro code approach. And this time it's about Northwind inventory sample. So this is a really cool sample, a plugin extension for Copilot for Microsoft 365 with the Northwind inventory information. Then we move into Marc Windle, who's going to talk about the SharePoint Embedded. And this is a part of a longer series. Last week it was a cliffhanger, and then we needed to move to our next demo. But hopefully we'll continue from that cliffhanger this week with Marc, and then we see more additional things on the SharePoint Embedded, which is a super cool technology as well. And then last but not least, and kind of being the exception in the rule for Microsoft employees, is Paolo, who's kind of talking about enabling Microsoft Copilot Studio in your tenant for SharePoint content. And this is part of a bit longer series again. We're doing a three demo series on that one as well, where we're going to walking through different scenarios, how to use the Copilot Studio as in a low code, no code option of building your Copilots for your SharePoint content. And this is actually quite typical scenario. So you might have your HR information or your product information or your technical information in the cloud, which typically means SharePoint, and you want to build some sort of a Copilot on top of that. And Copilot Studio is by far the most simplest way of doing that. And Paul is going to walk through today the configuration requirements, and that's set up for there. And then next time we're going to go a bit more detailed on the options and further in the options in the following months as well. So a lot of interesting topics today. Quickly recapping different assets, not going to mention all of the URLs. We have a lot of assets available. Please take advantage of our YouTube, where we have new videos going live every single day. I think last week we released 14 new videos on that YouTube channel. Subscribe, you'll know what's coming up. And there's new content coming up there all the time. We have our LinkedIn group for discussions and updates. We have our open source assets, a lot of repos available in GitHub. But as it might be a bit difficult to find a relevant sample for you, we also have the sample galleries, which are really the easiest to find the relevant sample, which you can use as a reference point or as an example or as an inspiration. Wow, somebody built something like this. That's really cool. Let's do something similar within our company as an example. And there's a lot of URLs to remember. AKMS Community Home is the one which is collecting all of those URLs to a one centralized location. Now, you are in a community call, so you're kind of familiar with the setup, but we do have quite a lot of these community calls, and that's kind of intentional. There's a lot of cool stuff happening across the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform, and we want to showcase those to you together with our community. So this is the Tuesday 8 a.m. Call happening with Microsoft speakers. This is the call every single Tuesday. Then we have the Power Platform and Office Add-ins monthly community calls, which are typically, Power Platform typically are with community demos. Office Add-ins is with Microsoft demos, Microsoft-led demos. And then we have our 7 a.m. Thursday series, which is either Microsoft 365 and Power English is hard. Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call, or Viva Connection and the SharePoint Framework community call. That's happening basically at 7 a.m. Thursday every week. It's either one of those calls in a cycle because they're happening bi-weekly. It's either one of them in 1 week. So you can download the recurrent invites as AKMS community calls, and you can always see the agendas for upcoming calls at community/meetup, which is a great service to stay up to date on what's coming. Now, we do welcome community demos in these things. So if you're looking into, for example, doing some practices for your live in-person demonstration, or if you want to learn how to do demos within these calls, or in general, just to get some exposure, if you want to be an MVP maybe in Microsoft, or if you build something cool, come and show it with others within the community within these calls. Then you can just fill in the form, and we'll contact you and get you scheduled within the calls. Now, we do not welcome product demos, but we do want to have community stories and what you built. If you played around with some cool thing in Power Platform or in Microsoft 365, those are also welcome. You learn something new about, let's say, Power Apps. Yes, we can get you scheduled within the community calls as well. Now, we have a lot of stuff available for you to get started. We have our Microsoft 365 developer program, which is providing you a free E5 developer tenant by default. Now, there has been some updates related on those rules, and there's going to be more clarifications on all of that within our developer blog. But by default, it's a free E5 developer tenant for getting started within the development. Now, we also have a lot of learning material in the Microsoft Learn as a learning module. So there's much, which is probably more than 200 already. I should update those numbers within the slide. We also have our weekly or bi-weekly shows related on Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. PMP Weekly happening, surprise, surprise, every single week with yours truly and Waldek Mastercards. Then there's the bi-weekly happening Mondays at Microsoft with Caruana Gatimu and Heather Crook. And then there's the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast. So good shows to stay up to date on what's happening. Now, I kind of mentioned that there's samples. There's a lot of samples. We have more than 1,860 samples available at Microsoft 365 Power Platform Unified Sample Gallery at AKMS Community Samples. And these are really, really good samples to get ideas and inspiration and things, or if you run into a dead end with code or sample, go here, have a look on what other people have built, and maybe you'll find a sample which will get you unplugged within your scenario, which is really, really cool. Now, as you then find a sample in a GitHub, it's referring to GitHub. You might be wondering on, oh my God, how do I get now started? Or maybe if you're wondering on, I want to present in some of these calls, but how would I actually do that? That's why we have Sharing is Caring initiative, and Hugo is in the call to do a quick recap. What is that all about?
Thank you, Vesa. Well, this community is an inclusive and welcoming community. So it doesn't matter if you've never done a GitHub pull request or you've never presented before. If you've got something you want to share, if you've got something to contribute, we're here to help you. We have these sessions that are never recorded, that are usually small groups, and it's a safe space. You don't have to worry about anybody making fun of you. We're actually going to get together and we're going to do the thing that you're scared about. So, for example, in our first-time contributor, we're going to do your first pull request. And again, we have lots of sessions scheduled. Go to AK.ms, Sharing is Caring, to book your time. And then we have office hours coming soon. We just have to schedule those things. And yes, our first session is coming just after I come back from vacation. So unless you want to come with me to Jamaica. All right.
I can join there.
Absolutely.
Is that an open invite? Okay, you're going to pick me up within your plane, right? So.
Now, once you have contributed to the community, we have our community recognition program, and the recognition program is something that is running with a Credly, which is badges that are electronic badges that show up on your LinkedIn profile, on your blog, on anything you want. It's no cost to you. All you have to do is you have to go to ak.ms/community/recognition. You have to associate your GitHub account with your email address. And once you create a recognized contribution, like a pull request to one of our repositories, we will automatically issue you a badge, and then you can show it proudly. We can't wait to see what you have to contribute. And back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Toronto, and Helsinki takes over. Now, quick recap on all of the events which are happening. So first of all, we have the Microsoft 365 conference event happening within April, end of April, and 1st of March and 2nd 1st of May and 2nd of May 2024, and that's happening in Orlando in Walt Disney World. Good way of combining maybe some family time in that area as well. So great opportunity of staying up to date on the Microsoft 365 AI, Teams, Viva, and all of that stuff. A lot of sessions already announced, and more Microsoft speakers will be announced in this website soon. On top of that, we have the European Collaboration Summit coming up on the mid-May this spring at Wiesbaden. Wiesbaden is right next to Frankfurt, so it will be in the central hub from a plane perspective, easy to land, easy to move away as well. Now, we also have the TechCon 365 happening in Seattle, DC, and Dallas, starting from June 3rd, 2024 in Seattle. This was used to be called EduCon, and now it's TechCon 365 to avoid any confusion, and that's all about Microsoft 365 and Power Platform topics. And then we have our Microsoft Power Platform Conference happening in Las Vegas in MGM again in September 18th to 2024. So a lot of big opportunities to hang with and meet other people in the community, and also meet the Microsoft employees. Now, on top of this, we have a lot of different other events happening all around the world, organized by our community members. So please go to the communitydays.org. Some of these are free, some of them are remote, some of these are in person. So please check the details from the communitydays.org. Now, from a news perspective, not that many news, but quite a lot. Well, not that little amount of news either from last week from Microsoft. Definitely the biggest news was the delivering Copilot for everyone as part of the Super Bowl announcements, and that was a really cool video in Super Bowl related on what Copilot can do to help you to be more efficient on your day-to-day work. 1 second, I will mute somebody because there's some audio hiccups. There we go, excellent. And then we have a lot of other news available from last week from Microsoft. I will paste in all of the news in the chat, and they will be mentioned also in the recording in the YouTube descriptions if you're interested on staying up to date on all of those different announcements. A lot of cool stuff happening across Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. Now, then we are ready for the picture together mode. So let's actually move in. For those who are willing, you are able to enable the camera. I can see already Stephanie there enabling the things. Let's see if should I actually try to get involved this time? And Charles is already waving. Let's wait a few more milliseconds. We have 50 seats in the room. I will actually try to put my camera on. Let's see, hopefully it doesn't pixelate completely. I get to be here as well. Did I get in? Did I get in? No, not yet. Waiting for it. 50 seats in the room. Good wave, Stephanie. That looks really, really good. Oh, no, I don't want to update that right now. I'm taking a screenshot. So 50 seats in a room. Let's see. I did not make it. Let's wait a few more seconds. We're filling in a few more. Oh, I got in. Yes, I'm on the back row. Almost the second last row. Excellent. I will put the recording on. Let's do some hand waving and waves. Everybody, thank you for being part of this community. Awesome to have you here. Let's do some hand waving. And Paolo in the front row. I can see a lot of familiar faces again in here. Awesome. Yes. Hopefully, and more people comes along. This is really good. It's growing, still growing. Let's do it one more time. Hand waving, everybody. Excellent. Thank you, Mark, on the central in the middle, showing how it can be done. Excellent. We'll do a GIF animation out of that. A lot of people on the camera today, and it was not pixelated. That's really, really cool. Cool. Let's then move in the actual starts of the day. So we'll start with Bob talking about extending Copilot for Microsoft 365, move to Marc about SharePoint Embedded, and then we're going to talk about Copilot Studio within the SharePoint content together with Paolo as the last demo. 15 minutes each. I think we are on the schedule. This is looking good.
Yeah, looks like we're right on schedule. It's great. Thanks everybody for joining. And thank you, Vesa and everyone. So today, you may have seen this demo before. Today, we're going to look under the covers of how this works. This was featured at Ignite in a few different sessions and also some hands-on labs. And the hands-on labs are open source, so I'll point you to those as well. So you can jump in and actually try this yourself. So let's see, where do we go here? Okay, so I want to start by sort of differentiating this. What we're talking about here is, and I know this is review from the last few sessions, but we really are talking about the Copilot in Microsoft 365. And right now, this functionality works especially in Teams, but we're expecting more. Copilot is basically the artificial intelligence assistant inside of Microsoft 365. And the way that it works, you can see kind of along the top here, right? You've got your tenants content is all getting pulled into the semantic index, which is a search index that's organized by the semantic meanings of the words rather than by text. And then Copilot itself, where it says there Copilot on the screen, actually there's a few components in there, including a large language model, but also an orchestration layer that's going to consult with the semantic index and the Microsoft Graph to pull your content in real time, feed it along with the user's prompts into the large language model, and then return responses such that the user's data or the customer's data never actually goes into the large language model. It's not used to train or in any way update the large language model with somebody's content. This is done always in each request. So there's two ways to extend this beyond the content inside of Microsoft 365. One is graph connectors, and I know Waldeck demoed these a couple of weeks ago, and I think Aicha also did a Python example of this last week. And so this is the idea here is to just add your content into that semantic index. So everything is kind of brought right in to the semantic index, and from there it kind of, from a Copilot perspective, works the same as if you had a bunch of Word documents or something else inside of your content. And so that's really nice in scenarios where you don't necessarily have a lot of real-time updates because it takes a little while for that stuff to get indexed, but maybe you want to be more semantic about it, if you will. I'll give an example of that later. The other option, of course, and also where I guess you don't mind bringing your business data right into your tenant, into your Microsoft 365 tenant, and you can put permissions on them and things. What I'm going to talk about today is a plugin, and this Northwind sample is a plugin. So rather than consulting the semantic index in this case, Copilot is going to call your plugin in real time. And so this, of course, has the advantage of being real time, as well as allowing you more control over interactions with the user. You get to build an adaptive card, which can provide details and also even allow users to update data and things like that. And so I'll show all of that. So we're just going to focus on the plugin model today. Now there's a few different ways to build plugins. So the first one is what I'm going to show, which is to write something with code. And usually Teams Toolkit makes this a lot easier. The most mature way to do this, I think, is really the message extension. So you build a message extension for Teams, and I'll show that briefly. And then it works also as a plugin. Another option is you can build Power Platform connectors or Logic App connectors. So there's a huge ecosystem here. However, in order to do this, you need to be currently you need to be an ISV who is certified in the Power Platform to build connectors and put them in the store. So this is going to be more useful, I think, for ISV products initially, at least, than building something for inside of your company. And then if you're a low-code developer, you can also build plugins with Copilot Studio. So that is another option. I don't know if it has all the capabilities that I'm going to show, though, so I think it's something it's growing and improving and is certainly a great path for the low-code audience. So I'm going to start by sort of reviewing what is a Teams message extension. And so here I am. And I'm going to ask Rabia to sort of update, to check on the inventory of one of our products. And so what's going on here is that, Rabia is, and let me see if I can get rid of this thing at the bottom. So apologies for that. That should not really be there. anyway. Display settings. All right. I guess I'm just going to live with it for now. So I want Rabia to check the inventory on this item. And I really don't want her to have to go find the item in our ERP system based on, I might spell the name wrong or something, who knows. So really, it's much better to use a message extension, and that's what we have here. Notice that there's 3 tabs at the top of Northwind inventory. There's product inventory, discounts, and revenue. So there's 3 different ways that she can search, or that I can search. So I'm going to go ahead and search for chai. And there's chai. And so notice down at the bottom, I'm highlighting the query. So I basically got my log file showing. And that you can see that I typed in the product name equals chai, and it found exactly 1 product. So now I can click on this, bring it into the chat, and send this off. And there we have it. And now here's where I can take action, where you can actually go ahead and, in this case, maybe Rabia discovered another case of chai that we didn't know we had. So she's going to update the stock level to 375. And she could do this on her phone. So this is a real time saver. It minimizes errors, because if there were 2 products similarly worded, I was forced to pick the right one initially. And these actions are based on the adaptive card model. So it's something you may be familiar with. Again, you can follow along in the log file messages at the bottom. So let's take a look at the app manifest. So if you've been following these calls, you probably know that Teams apps have a manifest. And basically, you could host it anywhere on the internet, but you want to use the manifest to sort of tell Teams, hey, here's where this thing is. In this case, we're actually going to rely pretty heavily on the description and the name, because these are really going to be used now not only by humans, but also by Copilot, to know what does this plugin do, and what does it really offer to users. So very long and detailed description. You're advised to even mention in that description that this is working in Copilot. And then here is, under Compose extensions, which is the old name for message extensions, here is the definition of those message extensions that you saw in the little pop-up there when I was composing the message to Rabia. So this one has 3 different commands that correspond to those 3 different tabs that you saw. And if I go to the first one, I'm actually going to skip the first one, because we'll get back to that, because it's a little bit fancier than the others. But here's an example: discount search. And this allows you to search for discounted products by category. And so you can type in a category name and get back products that are discounted within that category. So it's nice, but it's also a bit limited, because if I wanted to search for discount products by some other criteria, can't really do it, because the only parameter I'm providing is category name. And then if I go down a little bit further to revenue search, you'll see that I can look for things by revenue. What was cool about this is I was writing the code in the backing service, and I'm kind of lazy by nature, so I didn't really want to try to think of all of the ways that somebody could enter a range of revenue in a text field. So I decided to just accept the word high or low or a range in this exact format. And what's cool is that Copilot is smart enough to take whatever the user typed and convert it into this format. So if they say, more than 50K, it's going to put 50000 dash, and then, and thus I can just do a JavaScript split on the text field and get back the upper and lower range of that. So really simple. And it was great that all of a sudden I'm starting to think, oh, maybe I'm just going to program this thing in English. And what was really interesting, I don't have the demo, but my teammate Tomomi demonstrated this in Japanese, and it actually figured out she prompted in Japanese, the response came back in Japanese, but it was able to correlate these descriptions with the Japanese prompt, because it's all semantic, right? It's not based on keywords at all. So let's go up to this first example again. And I have 5 parameters here. So that's what makes this more powerful. This is going to filter similar to what you might filter in a catalog website, right? Maybe you're on looking at products and you want things that fit more than one detail, right? And every time you click, you're adding, no, I only want things in a certain color, I only want things in a certain size, and it's narrowing it down. And that's how these work. So I could search by name. I could search also by category name, by inventory status, supplier city, and stock query. And if I say, things that are in the meats category from London, it will filter on those 2 things. So this gives Copilot the ability to do much more interesting queries. So let's take a look at how this works in Copilot itself. So please find Northwind products with more than 50K revenue along with any ad campaigns. And this is the real power of this, right? Like you could build a custom Copilot, your own chatbot that would do the inventory part. But here I actually said, give me information along with ad campaigns. Well, there's no ad campaigns in the Northwind database, but they're in SharePoint. So I have documents from these 3 ad campaigns. It went and looked up the products in the inventory database and then went and looked in SharePoint for ad campaign documents. And you can see here that, it found the Oktoberfest promotion and the for a product I can't probably pronounce very well, and April in Paris for Côte de Blé and stuff like that. So that's really where a lot of the power lies, is in having something that knows all of the content inside of, or has access to all the content inside of your Microsoft 365 and your line of business system, because users are always juggling these things, right? So let's look at another example. You can see this is wisdom here, right? You want to hover over these little reference marks and make sure that it's not hallucinating or something. It should be showing you the reference to the actual document. So let's do another example. I'm going to type new chat, and this is a best practice for teaching end users, really, and you've probably done this in ChatGPT and elsewhere. These queries, these prompts are kind of changed together, so each one can build on the previous prompt, which is great until you want to really change the subject and it still keeps talking about the previous topic. So the way to kind of clear it out and say we're starting a whole new conversation is to type new chat. So there's new chat, and now I'm going to do another example. Check Northwind inventory for dairy products low on stock. Show a table and reference the details for each product. So this is pretty cool because you can see that it figured out down at the bottom, you can see category name is dairy and inventory status is low stock. And so that filtered it down to exactly 4 products. And, you can see what they are. It formatted the table. It was also, I thought, pretty smart in that it figured out that the relevant data columns for a stock, something about inventory stock, was units in stock, units on order, and reorder level. So I didn't have to tell it that. Now it's not always going to be perfect, but there is some artificial intelligence in this. And now what I notice is that we have not ordered any camembert. We're below the reorder level. What went wrong? So I'm going to go ahead and fix that right now. So by hovering over the reference, I get to that same adaptive card that you saw me use inside of the Teams message extension. It's the same code. And now I can go ahead and order another 50 units from right there. Now, when we say that Copilot for Microsoft 365, that plugins can take action on data, right now at this point in time, that means that you can have an adaptive card that is displayed that takes action. If I ask Copilot, please order more camembert, right at this moment in time, it would not be able to do it. This is an evolving space. Taking action and updating data is something you want to be careful about. So at this point in time, we're sort of mitigating that by having to go through the adaptive card. And again, you can see that happened in the back end by my log file. Now, what's on my mind here is that, I really wish I could, I'm wondering if there was any delivery issues, then maybe that's why we're running low on stock. And so I asked it to draft an email asking about delivery issues. So what's cool about this is it was able to figure out that each one of those products had a supplier. And then it actually worded the email about these suppliers rather than the specific products. Now, someday, maybe it would be nice if this would actually go into Outlook and write the email for me there. But again, at this moment in time, these plugins work in Teams, in the M365 Copilot in Teams. And so I'm going to have to copy and paste that. But it still saves me time over having to write it myself. And I think it does a fairly nice job. So now let's take a look at the code. And I think I might be out of time, actually, already. Am I out of time?
Yes, you are.
Oh, well, then I will point you to the code. I will point you to the code and say that everything you've seen here is here in Ignite 23-lab. So aka.ms/Ignite 23-lab. And if you go in there, you will see all of the instructions on how to set this up. This is a very informal lab, so it's just a set of README files. And yeah, you can come in here and it will walk you through everything that you need to set this up yourself. And I apologize for not going faster in the demo so that I could show more code, but you got to see the manifest, which I think is probably the most important part.
Exactly.
So,
Thank you, Bob, on that one. I think the behavior functionality is what we're able to build, and the things, that's the most important part, because that's the inspiration to then have a look on the code and tutorials. And as you said, you've done a great job on creating those tutorials. And so there's a step-by-step guidance available within the GitHub. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Along with the code and everything else. So
exactly.
On to the next piece. Really
cool stuff. Yes, on to the next one. So Marc Windle is on the call. He left us in a cliffhanger last week on our weekly series. Thank you, Bob. That's good. That was good.
Well, hey, everybody. My name is Marc Windle. I'm a PM at Microsoft, and today I'm going to talk about how you can manage, secure, and share content with SharePoint Embedded. There's a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do, so I'm going to give you a quick tour of the APIs involved here. And then show you how you can create and secure containers. So some of the permissioning model stuff with that, managing container contents, and then how you can search container content as well. Before I get into the thick of it, I just want to do a really quick plug for the SharePoint Embedded Developer Summit that we're having. This is a very small event where we're going to be doing some hands-on labs and kind of getting our hands dirty with some of the SharePoint Embedded tech here. The intent is, if you're really serious about developing a SharePoint embedded application, you can register and hopefully attend this event. It's going to be small. I think we're going to have about 50 folks that are coming for this. It's March 26th through 27th. It's in person at Redmond Microsoft main campus. And the intent is that you're going to be hands-on building kind of your own app and getting to the point where you're building a POC with engineers and product experts on SharePoint Embedded. So if that sounds like it's interesting to you, you can register at aka.ms/SPE-summit. Registration is going to close on February 24th, and spots will be confirmed by March 1st. Okay. So now kind of getting into some of the technical details here. This is a graphic that we have shown over the past couple weeks. Just a quick reminder of the product, what SharePoint Embedded is. So SharePoint Embedded allows you to write a custom application that can create and manage content within your own kind of content partition in an M365 tenant. Now that tenant might be yours, or if you're writing a multi-tenant application, that might be, some of your customers. That content is created in a thing called file storage containers via Graph APIs, and that's what we're going to look at today. It's just exactly how you do that. But I want to step into like some of the permissions and things like that. So, quick review again. What is a container? Well, your app can create a collection of containers in a tenant, and it's effectively a headless SharePoint content partition for your application. Each container is like a document library. It's not exactly the same thing, but that's the right metaphor for you to have in mind when you're writing an application and creating these containers. Your app has full control over those containers, and every container lives within a tenant. So now let's talk a little bit about permissions for that. That had a timely question on the chat this morning that hopefully we can answer here. So at the application level, in terms of permissions for these container collections and things like that, all your app needs to ask for in order to manage this collection of containers in a tenant is a new graph permission scope and role called file storage container.selected. And so this is a new one. It's actually, I think, still hidden, but becoming available on Graph. It grants your app access to containers and their contents. Now there's delegated, it's a permission scope and role, so there's both delegated and app-only access. The cool thing about this is that it avoids overly permissive grant requests on sites and files. So you don't need to, in order to write a SharePoint embedded application, you don't need to go ask, your customer's tenant admin to give you sites.readwrite.all. So that's a big thing. And you are able to also grant other apps access to containers that your app owns. And so if you want to access secondary apps or something like that, or maybe your customer needs to have read-only access to some of your container contents, that's possible as well. Now, getting into the kind of the lower unit, the containers themselves, each container has 4 built-in permission roles, and those are reader, writer, manager, and owner. And it's a kind of progressively in more permissive grants. And obviously, owner has full control on those. In each of those permission roles, you can assign both users and or groups to them. And then you can also assign external guest users based on the tenant's sharing settings. And so I'm not going to kind of get too deep on that today. I don't have enough time, but just like for OneDrive and SharePoint, the tenant admin can control external sharing settings for guest users. Well, there's a new partition in there where the tenant admin can control whether external sharing is available for containers as well. And then files. So last week I mentioned that the permissions of file storage containers are a little bit different than SharePoint. Specifically, the key difference there is that you cannot break permission inheritance with containers. And so you assign users and groups to those 4 roles at the container level, and then everything under there is additive. And so you can assign either at the folder level or at the individual file level, you can grant permissions to those kind of individual drive items as well. And those, if you do it at a folder level, it will cascade down. So additive permissions at the file and folder level. And then that is also what enables some of the built-in sharing and collaboration experiences that you see with Office, web, and desktop. So that's pretty much it in terms of the theory here. Now we're going to go get our hands dirty. I've got a few demos here. Just some helpful links as we go through if you're trying to find some of the stuff that you're looking at. The VS Code extension, I'll briefly show it. We looked at that last week as well. You can access that at aka.ms/SPE-VS Code, or you can just search for SharePoint Embedded in the VS Code Marketplace. Also, the Postman collection, again, aka.ms/SPE-Postman, if you want to be able to use that and import that. So I'm going to go in now and show you the VS Code extension, just kind of pick up where we left off last week if you joined us there. Here we're just looking at some code, but if you click on the SharePoint Embedded VS Code extension on the left, you can see kind of where we left off last week. One of the things that we did is we loaded the sample app, and I was trying to get it running. Took a little while to download all those NPM libraries, and I wasn't able to quite show it. So I'll show that now. But you can also export the Postman config. This is an environment file that after you run through the getting started steps in the VS Code extension, you can just import that environment file and kind of get to work quickly. This is what the sample app looks like. We have 2 sample apps. This is the React Fluent UI Microsoft Graph Toolkit one. So predominantly, most of the stuff happens within a web browser, and most of the calls are directly to Graph using a public client application. So once you have this app running, you can see you can manage your storage containers. So I've got a couple here, content demo. So this is just really making calls to Graph to pull the contents of this container. Looks a lot like a document library, and that's why that's a good metaphor. I'm not going to go into all of the things you can do in this sample app. I just wanted to kind of show you that it exists. Once you get it going from VS Code, all you have to do is hit run, and you can run this. You can see this is running localhost for me, and sign in and start playing with it, uploading content, and you can check that out there. What I want to do now is give you a quick tour of some of the APIs. And so in Postman, like I said, you can export that environment from VS Code. If you want to import that environment, you can do that from your file system. Also, that Postman collection, you can just go ak.ms/sbe postman. I'm not going to do it because I already have it in here. But you can see all you have to do to import that is just put that URL. This is what the Postman collection looks like when you have it imported. It's really just a bunch of requests so you can explore and navigate our APIs. There's two folders, delegated folder and application, based on the type of authentication that you want to use. And I'm going to open up delegated. I already have an access token. So what I'm going to show you here is just some of the new container management APIs. First thing I'll do is list all of the containers that I have. So I already have an access token. It's pretty simple. I have that container type ID, and you'll notice that this is currently on the Graph beta endpoint /storage, file storage containers and containers. When I send that request off, you can see I have two containers in there, the same two that we were looking at in the sample application. But let's create our first container together. So M365 community container, you give it a display name and description. Pretty straightforward. I pass it container type ID. It really just identifies it with my application. And once that request succeeds, we created our first file storage container together. All right, now I'm going to get that container. Again, all of these APIs are on Graph. You can see that the container can have custom properties and permissions. So I talked about those permission roles. What I want to do now is just show you what it looks like to be able to add a user to one of those permission roles. So here I've got Megan B. I'm going to create user permission request. I'm going to add Megan B as a writer on this container. So when I send that request, Megan's now a writer on the container. Pretty straightforward to be able to grant users access to containers. So Megan's now a writer. You can also add groups like I mentioned in that slide. So I'm going to add everybody that's part of the retail member group to be a reader on this container. Cool. That's it. Very straightforward. Now when I go get that container object, you can see I've got a few different permission assignments. First of all, I'm the owner because I created this container with delegated permissions. That associated user context is granted ownership permissions on the container. And there you can see the retail members group are readers on that, and Megan is a writer. All right. Now, going back up to the top, this is one of the key things I want to show you today. Every container that you create has an ID. Now, the cool part about containers is that when I go over to the existing Graph APIs, now I'm no longer on beta. I'm on the v10 endpoint, and I'm talking to the drive object. So that existing, well-known, mature API to interact with drives and drive items works because you can treat a container as a drive in Microsoft Graph. So if you've got a bunch of existing code that interacts with drive and drive items, apart from the container management, once you get into kind of managing the content of that stuff via the drive and drive item APIs on Graph, it's just going to work. It's the same interaction model. So that's a big thing. Now I got that container that we created together as a drive object from Graph. Now I can go take a look at the content in there. So I'm going to get the drive items, and you'll see that it's empty. We just created that container together. So I'll upload a Word file. And that's it. Pretty simple. That's small file upload. You're just adding drive items and things like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. I don't have time to get into all of the details and the APIs, but the best part about it is these are the mature Graph APIs that hopefully you've come to have some experience with. We talked about sharing now. I just added this file if I want to be able to share that link, I can create a share link at the /share link or /create link endpoint. If I want it to be just a view-only link to folks in my organization, I can do that. And now that file that I just uploaded has this share link and that I can, send via email or a Teams message or whatever. Now, just quickly covering search. There's a bunch of different search capabilities that you get, but again, the key takeaway here is that all of the content within SharePoint Embedded containers gets fed into the index as normal as you'd expect from OneDrive and SharePoint content. And so again, I'm using beta here, but I can actually use the V10 endpoint. The existing search queries just work against SharePoint Embedded content. There is in the future going to be an additional query parameter that you have to provide in order to access SharePoint Embedded content. I'll cover that in a future call. It's not available yet, but at the moment it all just works without that additional parameter. So here we can look at all the containers by searching for drives across my container type ID. So this is now a new managed property, and I can issue that query and I can get all of the containers. So I can search, I can search for all of my containers by title across my container type ID or anything like that. And then again, if I want to find content in a particular container, let's say I'm looking for this is a drive item, so a file. I'm looking for the word budget in a particular container. Pretty straightforward. Again, these are the existing graph query APIs that you can access, and then I can search for different things like that, search for content in containers. So that's a really quick tour of some of the APIs. Key point is that you can go get the SharePoint Embedded Postman collection, import it quite easily, set up your environment using the VS Code extension. The main new API set are things dealing with the new containers entity, and then once you have a container, you can interact with that as a drive and with drive and drive item APIs. So that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat, and I'll kind of go back and answer some questions. Otherwise, thanks for the time.
Excellent. Thank you, Marc, on that one. Awesome. Good to see. Getting further down on the details on the capabilities, what we have on SharePoint Embedded. So awesome stuff. Now, we might go a few minutes long today. Let's see how Paolo can deal with this one. Sorry for the technical hassles so on that one, but thank you, Marc. Thank you, Bob. Paolo, we can see the screen. Take it away.
Yep. Thank you, Vesa. Yeah, so welcome everyone. And now we are going to see how we can use Copilot Studio to create a custom Copilot to consume SharePoint online content. Let me first of all, and like always, set a bit of a context. So clearly, we all love Microsoft Copilot, but what if we want to create a custom Copilot? So we want to work on a specific set of data or documents that we have, for example, in a SharePoint Online set collection, because we want to create something like an HR Copilot, a research and development Copilot, or stuff like that. And we want to do that with full security in place. So we want to have all of the user being able to see and get access to the content that they can only have access to. We can do that using a SharePoint Online set collection and using Copilot Studio. And we can then have a kind of a bot experience for our end users through which they will be able to query and search with natural language processing and with the Copilot-like style approach. They will be able to search and find information inside the target SharePoint Online set collection. That's what we are going to see how we can do in practice. So let me move to the demo and let me show you first of all how it works, and then how we can create such kind of solution. So here I have a sample Contoso HR website in which I have a bunch of hypothetical HR-related documents, like information about a career path, or about hiring procedures, or unfortunately layoff procedures, information about the incomes of employees in the US and stuff like that. And just for the sake of completeness, fun enough, all these documents have been generated using Microsoft Copilot for the sake of having a fake set of content available in my tenant. So now I have this set collection, and let me already copy the URL of the set collection because I will use it later. But I also have already created a custom Copilot with Copilot Studio, and then I will show you how to create one from scratch. In this custom Copilot, my HR Copilot, I can easily send requests with a natural language processing approach to my custom Copilot to get answers and information out of the documents that I have in my SharePoint Online set collection. So, for example, I can say something like, what are the hiring procedures? And I will get back an answer, which will be based on the content of the documents that I have in the SharePoint Online set collection, including references to the documents that I have in that set collection. The interesting part of the story is that whenever I will make a request or a prompt to this custom Copilot, I will get back answers only from that specific base of information, and I will not get information from anywhere else in the cloud. So it is a specific Copilot focused on a specific topic. And of course, I can ask other stuff like, I don't know, how can I improve my career? And stuff like that. And again, by prompting this custom Copilot, I will be able to query the content of my SharePoint Online. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, and you see I've got another answer still based on a reference to some documents that I have in my target environment. Now, let's say that we want to create from scratch this kind of solution. So we can, of course, start having the Copilot Studio. We click on New Copilot, and we give a name to this Copilot, which could be, for example, HR Copilot, which is already taken, demo, just for the sake of providing a different name. The base language will be English, and now I can provide the URL of the site that I want to use when relying on generative AI. So I can simply paste the URL of my site. I don't need to specify the HTTPS in front of it because it is not needed. It will automatically understand that we are talking about a SharePoint Online data source because of the .sharepoint.com URL. And then I can click on the Create button. It will create a custom Copilot. And again, this animation is really nice and amazing, I would say. And as soon as the custom Copilot will be ready, we will simply need to configure the security in order to make it possible for the custom Copilot to securely access the content on behalf of the currently connected user. So how can we do that? We need to go under Settings, and we need to go under Security. But in order to do that, we will also need to publish our Copilot. So let me publish it once. And of course, okay, let me double check that we have everything in place. So let me see if we can do that. Okay, in the meantime, let me go to my Azure, and let me create an application, and we'll come back and configure it. So we need to configure an application in Azure Entra ID. So we register a new application, we provide a name, which could be Contoso HR App Reader, which will be the app we are going to use in order to read the content in our SharePoint Online set collection. It will be a multi-tenant application so that eventually we can export the custom Copilot definition and reuse it onto additional tenants. We click on Register. Then we need to configure for this application a set of specific permissions. Here I have to specify that we want to have the Microsoft Graph delegated permissions, and we will come back on this topic later. And we want to have the OpenID and the profile permission, as well as we want to have the size.read.all permission delegated, as well as the files.read.all delegated permission. Once we have done that, we grant the permissions to this app as an admin, and we go to the certificates and secret so that we can configure a client secret for this application. Client secret will be the name or whatever you like, and you can give it a duration up to you. Now, let me copy in a notepad file, for example, the value of the secret, and let me also copy the client ID, which is available in the overview section of my Enter ID application. Once I've done that, I simply need to go to the authentication panel, and I have to configure this application to work with the web platform. And here I will have to provide a URL, which will be the one that I can get from the Copilot Studio. So let me go back here and let me open again this application. And now we can go under security. In security, we can configure that we want under authentication to use a manual configuration. We copy the redirect URL from the Copilot Studio, and we provide it in the URL on the Enter ID application. And we enable access tokens and ID tokens. Once we have done that, we simply need to go back to Copilot Studio. We need to choose the flavor of provider that we want to use, which will be Azure Active Directory v2. Should be Enter ID, doesn't matter. We specify the client ID and the client secret of the application that we have just registered. So my client ID here and my secret right here. And by doing that and by saving the application and publishing the application again, we will be able to use this new Copilot. We will also need to go through an authentication process. So the end user will need to authenticate the very first time they will use our custom Copilot. So let me go under Publish, and let me publish this new Copilot built with Copilot Studio. Once it will be published, I will go back to the list and back again to my test interface, and I will be able to show you how the Copilot works. So just a few more seconds. Should be almost done, hopefully. And if not, I will switch to the other one just to save some time because we are running out of time, unfortunately. Okay, it is published. So let me go back to the whole list of Copilots and let me open it again. Now that I have configured the authentication, as you can see, I need to log in order to use this custom Copilot. So let me click on the login button. And for every single user, this will be the same experience. I will choose the user identity that I want to use. And I will copy this magic code, which I simply need to paste back into the chat with my bot in order to be authenticated. And now I'm able to consume this custom Copilot, providing any kind of questions like, I don't know, tell me about the average incomes of employees. Oh, come on, Paolo. Okay, here we are. And now you should be able to query my SharePoint Online using the delegated access token of my user, so being able to access the content in SharePoint Online on behalf of the currently connected user. It takes a while, especially the very first time, but now we are able to consume our data. So quickly back to the presentation. Couple of things that I want to let you aware of. First of all, a recap of the creation steps. I will make this presentation available. So here you can find all of the steps that you need to go through in order to enjoy this experience of being able to create your own custom Copilots. But more important, what about security? As I already briefly said, we are using delegated permissions. That means that the resulting permissions for the custom Copilot will be the intersection of the permissions between the user and the app, meaning that users will only be able to see and consume data that they are authorized to. Okay, so no data leaks at all. They will only be able to consume the data that they can already see in SharePoint Online. Plus the fact that using the custom Copilot with an application registered in Enter ID, what will actually happen will be that the custom Copilot will be able to consume data that both the user and the app have been authorized to. So eventually, you can have a more strict security for the Copilot compared to what you have for the current user. So really powerful and really secure. Personally, I love it. That said, here we have a bunch of useful links if you want to dig into this. We will also have in the upcoming weeks additional demos to dig into how you can use this kind of stuff in SharePoint Online and Teams and many more places. And that said, thank you, and back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Paolo, on that one. And we do apologize. We went a bit long today, but it's okay. Awesome demos by Bob and Marc and Paolo. All of these people will come back on the show and talk even more about these topics in a more detailed way within the upcoming calls. So all of these topics actually are part of a bit larger series which we're doing, and then we'll have other topics obviously covered in the Tuesday call as well. But thank you, Bob. Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Paolo. Awesome stuff. Thank you for all of the attendees for the Together mode, who were in the Together mode, and also a lovely chat, which is filling up fast. That's always good to have an interactive session and interactive discussion within the chat. Now, next week, we'll have Waldek Vastukarts coming back on talking about the Pro Code development story around extending Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft Craft Toolkit. We have Paolo coming back on creating custom copilots with Copilot Studio based on your files in SharePoint, and a bit more detailed on, okay, so now we want to actually build these scenarios, configurations, all of that stuff. So we built on the story what we saw today. And then Mark Cashman is joining us on an inside planning for Microsoft 365 Community Conference, which is the one which is happening in Orlando, April 13th to May 2nd. So that's on 20th of February. And you can download the recurrent invite from that URL. Now, we do have also, outside of the community calls, we have a lot of other activities. Also, one of them, a relative new one, is still the Discord server. So if you want to help other people in the community, or if you have questions, this is one location where you can go and ask questions. There's more than 1,600 members already. Then I need to update the slide because that member attendees is growing fast. We are also always looking for feedback within these calls. So please provide us feedback, what works, what doesn't work. What do you think about these kind of calls? Because that helps us on keeping these calls alive. So of course we need to show the value for our leadership around those calls as well. So if you have 1 minute or 2 minutes, that doesn't take longer than that, go to AKMS community calls and feedback. But that's it for now. The recording will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. You can subscribe there. You will know immediately when the call is getting published. Typically it's less than 24 hours, but you'll find all of the past recordings from there as well. Next call, 20th February. And I guess that's it for now. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for the lovely discussion. And if you have any questions, please use the chat during the call or right after the call, but not outside of the call windows, because that's not intended to be for that one. But have a great rest of the week, and thank you for being here. Cheers. Bye-bye.